Welcome to Break the Cycle with Bethany Dotson, the podcast for high achieving professional women who struggle with codependency, attracting emotionally unavailable partners, and who repeat dysfunctional patterns in love. I'm your host, Bethany Dotson, and if you want to learn more about how to break your cycle in love, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and be the first to know when a new episode drops. I'll see you inside. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how to actually attract an equal, even if maybe you don't think that's possible right now, or your track record has been so many decades in your life that you're just like you feel like you're not even sure if that you're capable of doing that. So, we're just going to dive right into it. If you have questions, please drop them in the comment box if you're here live or on replay, and I'll circle back and answer you to the best of my knowledge. So, the first thing, this is super, super important. The first thing that you must eliminate in your life is the blame game. This is huge. So, this doesn't necessarily just mean you're continuing to blame your ex, that asshole, how he screwed you over in the divorce, how he cheated on you with this woman, and how he moved on so fast, and blah, blah, blah. That's normal, right? To be in the blame game, especially after you've spent a lot of time with somebody, you've invested a lot of emotional energy, you've hoped and hoped and hoped for many years that they would change. But when you are stuck in the blame game, it just doesn't isolate itself to your ex or the ones before that. The blame game can also look like blaming your career. I don't have enough time. My job is crazy right now. It could be blaming your home life. My kids are going off to college. It's just not the right time right now. It could be blaming the area you live in. I once spoke with somebody on a breakthrough call who, her, according to her, in her mind, in her logic, the only reason at 50 plus that she'd never had a great relationship was because there was a lack of quality men in her area. So she was blaming the location that she was in for her lack of success in relationships. And none of those things are true. The only true thing that if you're constantly questioning, will I ever have a great relationship, is that you're very likely living in the blame game. And you have to stop that. You have to overcome that because it's going to prevent you from attracting somebody who is fully anchored in his or her, depending on your preference, own life. So why do we get addicted or hooked on the blame game? Why is it so easy? And a lot of people are in the blame game and they're not even fully conscious that they're doing it. When you and we're just going to talk about your narcissistic ex if you have one of those, for example. When you talk about what your ex did, and I hear this hundreds of times on calls that I do with women, when you talk about what your ex did, you are getting essentially a jolt of adrenaline. You're getting a jolt of dopamine, you're getting a jolt of serotonin, you're getting a jolt of norepinephrine, you're getting a jolt of biochemicals from your brain into your bloodstream through what are called neuropeptides. So your brain is, ooh, high alert, high alert, high alert. Body, get on high alert. And whenever you have thoughts about your ex or how terrible what he did to you, or you think about your career, and a lot of times women who have dysfunctional relationship patterns, that often shows up in their careers. They have dysfunctional job environments as well. So if you have a dysfunctional job environment, you might be complaining about how crappy your job is and how unfair it is and all this blah, 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 poor me, woe is me type of mentality. And whenever you do that, your body starts feeling angry, sad, hopeless, helpless, contracted. And over time, your body actually memorizes that emotional state as your normal. And no matter what you do in your life, you are going to find a way to feel those emotional states. And for people who are out of a bad relationship, that's talking about what their ex did to them. They could be, once worked with somebody who was 2 years out of an emotionally abusive marriage. And every single day, she could not stop thinking about what her ex did to her. She constantly researched narcissistic abuse. She stalked her ex and his new romantic interest on social media every single day, multiple times a day, She was essentially addicted. And it wasn't necessarily that she was addicted to her ex. It was, and not even that essentially she was addicted to the blame game. She was addicted to the biochemical dump she was getting every single day from doing that, just like a heroin addict is addicted to the biochemical surges that happens when he gets high. So, the first and foremost thing that you need to stop and you need to overcome and you need to be honest with yourself about is, where are you sitting in the blame game? Where are you telling yourself, I don't have enough time? There's a lack of quality men in my area. There's a lack of quality people in my area. My job is too crazy. My job is too toxic. Sometimes, unfortunately, it might be your children are acting out or lashing out. You might have a child who has mental health problems, mental health challenges, could be challenges because they were exposed to narcissistic abuse in your past relationship. So you need to look at how you are in the blame game, because if you are in blame, and I really want you to hear this, if you are in blame, in what blame is, in some way, life is unfair. You're living essentially in a victim mentality on some level. You might be successful, you might have a great career, but every day you go home and you're like, they're treating this person unfairly. They're treating this person better than me. I once talked with somebody who had was in a wonderful career, loved her bosses, loved her employers, but there was a new employee that had come onto her team, and she had been there way less time than this woman had, and she seemed to know everything, and she constantly felt unjustly treated because this woman was the new girl on the block. She got special treatment according to her. She got treated better by the executive team according to her. So there was all of this, like, this unfair, my life is unfair. My work environment is unfair. I live in a great, it's hard to meet men in my area. If those things are coming out of your mouth, if those things are cycling through your mind, you're holding yourself hostage, because you're essentially keeping yourself hooked and addicted to those biochemical feelings of, it's frustration, hopelessness, powerlessness. And when you are living in blame on some level, you are always going to attract somebody who's a match for you based on where you're vibrating emotionally and what your inner world is set to, the dial, the radio station your inner world is set to. So think about it. When you attract, if you've ever been in an emotionally abusive relationship, your ex probably led with a victim story, a sob story. Poor me, my exes are crazy. My boss is an asshole, all this kind of stuff. If you're living in that emotional state yourself, you are likely going to attract somebody who needs to victimize other people, whether that's a conscious or unconscious choice, in order to feel powerful and in control in the relationship. So, step number one is overcoming your addiction to the blame game. And blame, it's it's really seductive. It's very easy to sit and blame, but unfortunately, it keeps you stuck. And the even sadder part about that is, most people would prefer to stay stuck than venture into the unknown and open their heart, especially after many years or decades of self betrayal, ignoring red flags, not being able to trust themselves or trust other people. So, step number one, if you don't listen to any more of this video, is number one, you have to step out of the blame game. Shift number two, or point number two that I want to make, is, if you're trying to attract an equal and your goal is to attract an equal partner, when you keep attracting people who seem to be a couple of steps behind you, is that you need to recognize and look at and be honest with all of the ways you are emotionally unavailable for yourself. I know this is probably a big one. And you might say, no, I really showed up. I really stuck that relationship out. I hoped it was going to get better. I was a strong one in that relationship. Here's what I know to be true. After working with hundreds and hundreds of women and speaking with them on breakthrough calls, nearly everybody that I talked to knew, almost, and if I had to percentage wise, it would be like 90% of the people that I talked to and work with knew immediately, like in the first interaction with their ex, that this person was not right for them. But because of prior trauma, because of prior life conditioning, because of negative belief systems, because of wanting this, not wanting to be abandoned, not wanting to really wanting it to work out, whatever the case might be. They overrode those red flags. And whenever you override red flags, you are turning the other cheek to your intuition. You are essentially ignoring, you're not really ignoring red flags, although that is partly what you're doing. You're ignoring your own intuition. And when you're ignoring your own intuition, you're ignoring your own feelings. And if you're ignoring your own feelings, eventually that's what is going to be mirrored back to you in a relationship. So you have to look at the ways that you are emotionally unavailable. And this might look like staying with a partner who deep down was not right for you, dating, talking to you, hoping that it's going to lead to something more serious, friends with benefits situations where deep down you're you're hoping it's going to turn into more. Those types of things, you need to be really honest with yourself about, because if you're in those or making those choices, or you've had that in the past, it is not just the partner that you've been with that is emotionally unavailable. You are emotionally unavailable when you settle. The other way that emotional unavailability rears its ugly head is you might be a people pleaser. You might be afraid of telling people no. You don't want people to feel bad. You don't want them to think negatively of you. You want to be liked. It could also look like chronic busyness. This is a really big one, especially for women who have been out of an emotionally abusive relationship or a long-term marriage. They take they were living essentially in a state of fight or flight every day in that relationship. And they get out of that relationship and they're suddenly faced with all of these uncomfortable feelings of loneliness, of loss, of sadness, of guilt, of regret. And because they were so masterful at suppressing their feelings in a toxic relationship, they continue to be masterful at suppressing their feelings outside of a toxic relationship. And one of the biggest ways that people cope with uncomfortable feelings is trying to distract themselves. There's a lot of therapists out there that will tell you just keep busy, it'll go away eventually. Whenever you have a negative thought, just try to reverse it immediately and try not to think about that and try not to feel that. And they try to give you all of this well meaning advice, but ultimately, all that's doing is suppressing your feelings. And when you suppress your feelings, it's you've got a pressure cooker on the stove and you've got the heat turned up to high and you're never taking the lid off and there's eventually no more water or steam in there. It's just going to burn up. Unfortunately, when you suppress your feelings, you're never gaining mastery over accepting your feelings. And when you don't have mastery at accepting your feelings, it's very likely, highly likely that outside in the real world, you are not going to accept people for who they really are. You are going to want to convince yourself and jump through hoops and believe in somebody's potential while you fall into the familiar pattern of losing yourself in that relationship. So, the second step is that you need to be honest about how you are emotionally unavailable in your own life. And that doesn't mean that doesn't necessarily mean that you're consistently getting into long distance relationships or simply friends with benefit situationships. It is also about how you're interacting in other areas of your life. If you're people pleasing, if you're being a chronic busy person, if you're a workaholic, if you're transferring your codependent patterns out of a relationship and onto your career or onto your children. So you want to look at, where am I emotionally unavailable? Where am I ignoring my own feelings? Where am I not being true to myself? Okay, so that's the second step. The third thing that you need to keep in mind is, this is another really big one and one that I see a lot of women falling into, is you got to stop living what I call in the someday lie. Living in someday, the lie of living in someday. When I do more work on myself, I'll go on a date. Then I'll start attracting a better relationship. I was once talking with somebody at a meetup group and she was telling us about her bad experience in online dating. Really, she hadn't been on any like actual dates. She just been online dating and chatting back and forth with people. but she hadn't actually been on an actual date in 5 whole years, and she'd had a very long, unhealthy marriage. It didn't start off extremely dysfunctional, they never do, but it gradually progressed and got more and more unhealthy for her. And as a result of that, she exited and had massive trust issues. And what did she do? She did the things that I talked about not to do. She became a workaholic. She was working 16 hours a day. She never had time to date. She wanted to. There was a part of a small voice in her heart that knew she wanted companionship and she wanted to have a healthy relationship. But she had too many things stacked in the deck of it's not possible for me. And so she constantly found ways to sabotage that. And one of the things that she said was that I need to do more work on myself. One day when I lose more weight, one day when I do more work on myself, then I'll be ready to date again. Yours might be one day when I get that promotion. One day when my kids get a little older, they're out of the house. One day when I get a little older and I get some more time behind me when you've already had 4 or 5 years without a date. One day when I feel a little bit more confident. And when you are living in someday, you are basically settling, you are basically stagnating in your life. And it's no fault on your own if that's what's happening to you. So I want to remove the layer of judgment, but I also want to keep this conversation real. One of the biggest reasons that people fall into a pattern of living in someday is because they're living with unhealed trauma. When people have unhealed trauma, especially in a relationship, narcissistic abuse, betrayal trauma, emotional trauma, and that goes on for many years, if not decades, people start to lose their ability to respond to stresses or risk taking in their life. They become what we call their window of tolerance to stressors and risks, and going outside, stepping into the unknown in their life becomes smaller. And people who have unhealed trauma, when they get triggered by something, they their body responds and reacts disproportionately to the size of the trigger. This is shown in research and in brain scans. So people who have unhealed trauma, let's say narcissistic abuse trauma, are very sensitive to stress and taking risks in their life. And as a result of that, they tend to fall into a rut where life is just about waking up in the morning, going through the motions with their kids if they have them, going through the motions at work, coming home, trying to stay busy until it's time to go to bed so she doesn't think about how lonely she is or how overwhelmed she is or how stuck she feels in her life. And then finally goes to sleep if she does sleep well, or she might be mauled by thoughts and spiraling anxiety about her ex or what the future is going to hold and all kinds of things of this nature. So if you're living like that, it's because typically you have unhealed trauma. You haven't trained your brain or your body to stop being addicted to the blame game, to stop being afraid of the future, to stop beating yourself up inside, to stop feeling guilty, to stop feeling regretful, to stop feeling frustrated with yourself. So if you're living in someday, you can't really attract a high level person, a high value person. And we all have to some degree regrets. But if you're living in someday and your life feels like a little tight container and there's really not much that you're doing to step outside the walls of your comfort zone, you can expect that you'll attract somebody who is again a match for that. They might be not very satisfied in their careers. They might have a boss who is toxic. They may have an ex-wife who never lets them see the children. They might have a few toxic exes. They might have something going on in their life that is going to, in your eyes, probably cause you to think, oh, if they only change this, or he's got a lot of potential, if only he could get around this issue. So if you're not fully stepping it up in your life, and if you're not fully owning what you want in your life, and you're not enjoying your life every single day, and you're not taking risks, and you're not stepping out of your comfort zone, you are almost always going to attract somebody who's also living in blame on some level. Life is unfair. They are not going to be good communicating. They're probably going to be emotionally unavailable because they've also too suppressed unhealthy emotions. They might have their own trauma that they've never processed. So you need to be honest with yourself about, am I living in someday? And I'm going to be honest with you that if you are living in someday, that is not the inner world that you need to have if you want to attract a healthy partner. And I'm going to tell you this, it is never about how old you are, how much you weigh, what kind of career you have, how many children you have, what location in the world you live in. It is all 100% about your inner world, your inner dialogue, your inner psychology, your emotional home. So if you want to break free of that, the next thing that I'm going to tell you to do is to hire an expert. Why hire an expert? Because we get comfortable as human beings. Our brains, according to neuroscience, memorize negative patterns 8 times stronger than positive ones. In fact, we hang on to negative memories 10 times more than we do positive ones. We are more prone to think about negative things, to remember negative experiences in our life, to allow those negative experiences to limit what we do in the future. And this is going back to evolution because this is how our brain chemistry was formed and shaped over the centuries to help us survive and procreate the planet back when there were actual dinosaurs running around. But now, especially when we have relational trauma, you stack that biological kind of template with trauma from relationships, with being heartbroken, with childhood trauma, with all of these things that go on in your life that influence your choices in relationship, it can be pretty hard to break out of that by yourself because there's a famous saying in the personal development world. If you have a jar, let's say it's a pickle jar, the inside of the pickle jar label, the inside of the jar can't read the outside of the label. So it is often you are too close and too mired in your own patterns to actually see them fully. And there are a lot of women that I work with that are aware on some level that they're the problem. You need to be aware that you're the problem first and foremost. It's not your fault that because of abuse and all that kind of stuff. You need to be aware that you're the common denominator in your relationship choices. And you need to be aware that you are the only person that's ever going to be able to change that. It's not anybody else's responsibility. You have to take ownership of that. But beyond that, it is often, and myself included, we often have patterns and belief systems and choices and behaviors and thought processes that we're running on autopilot every single day. And when you work with an expert, that person is a neutral observer. They are the witness to your hangups and they're able to see your hangups faster than you can. They're able to call you out on things that you're doing that are limiting you. And again, it's not that you're a bad person if you're doing this. We all do this. It's just that the things that you've been doing up until this point in your life haven't worked. And so, hiring an expert, and specifically hiring an expert if you have narcissistic abuse, if you have a pattern of emotional unavailability in your relationships, and especially if you have childhood trauma or childhood conditioning, you want to be working with someone who is trauma informed. What does trauma informed mean? It means that the person, the coach, the mentor, the therapist that you're working with is not going to let you tell your story over and over again, session after session, hoping to get some clarity by retelling the story over and over again. When people have trauma, their brain is altered and their body is altered. And when people have that patterning of trauma, unconsciously they want to tell the story again and again. It's why most people turn to being an addict to researching narcissistic abuse because it gives their body and their brain that jolt of adrenaline and they're essentially addicted to adrenaline. When you work with somebody who's trauma informed, they are going to interrupt that pattern. They are going to give you things that are going to work with your body because trauma is stored in your body. It's stored as a memorized response system to certain situations. It's stored as certain emotional reactions that you just go to without even thinking about it. So, trauma informed means things like mind body therapy, somatic therapy, working with your body, noticing where you feel things in your body, learning how to emotionally self regulate in stressful situations, learning how to regulate, down regulate that fight or flight system in your brain every day so that you're more balanced and even. And when you're more balanced and even, then you can respond to challenges, dating again, with an open heart, with a clear mind, and learn how to communicate clearly. It's also a very interesting fact when you have unhealed trauma, it impacts the part of your brain that's responsible for talking. So if you find that you're a people pleaser, if you find that you're conflict avoidant, or you find that you clam up and you have a hard time communicating what you need, it might be due to unhealed trauma. So you need to be working with somebody who is going to keep you out of your story and keep you focused on where you want to go and give you evidence-based methods for literally rewiring your brain and your body out of fight or flight, out of this thing, the chronic thinking something's wrong with me, out of distracting yourself, out of the habitual addiction of distracting yourself and trying to numb yourself out to life, and help you slowly feel safe with your feelings, help you feel safe being vulnerable with other people, help you feel safe letting the walls down, help you feel safe showing up and dating again, help you feel safe communicating clearly in dating and romantic relationship scenarios. So when you work with an expert, it shaves years and years off of your timeline on what it might take you if you were to keep doing it your way, or keep avoiding, or keep thinking you can do it on your own. And if you've made it 40, 50, 60 plus years in your life, and you've done a lot of talk therapy, which has probably kept you in your story, and you've taken a lot of time off work or off of dating, and you've nosedived yourself into work in your career, and you've tried to date, but you're still not getting what you want, it's very likely that what you're doing isn't working fully. And it's quite possible if what your pattern in relationships is dysfunction, it's usually due to trauma. And that's the root issue, unhealed emotional or relational trauma, complex trauma. So, just to quickly recap, how to stop your pattern of dysfunction in relationships and finally attract an equal is to get out of the blame game, number one. Number two, overcome your own emotional unavailability, like being a workaholic, like staying chronically busy, like being a people pleaser, like saying yes when you mean no, like constantly ignoring your intuition and telling yourself you can't do this because of why and all this kind of stuff. Step number three is getting out of living in the someday lie. That might be someday when I get a new job, someday when I get a promotion, someday when my kids are older. One day when I feel a little bit more confident, I'll go on a date when it's been 5 or 7 years since you've been on a date. One day when I lose more weight, one day when the stars are perfectly aligned, then I'll take action. Then I'll go after what I really want is a big fat lie. And it's basically a cover up for fear. And what's holding you back is fear, doubt, fear of the future, fear of success. And in order to overcome that, one of the best ways that you can overcome that quickly and efficiently and effectively is by hiring an expert. And if you have trauma, working with a trauma informed expert, a coach, a mentor, a therapist. If you're going to go with a therapy route, working with a therapist who's going to keep you out of your story. Most coaches and mentors are not focused on your past and certainly don't really care that much about your story. They're more about helping you write the story of where you're going in your life. So if you feel like you need help with this, if it's been many years since you've been on a date, or it's been many years and you've been ignoring your intuition in a dysfunctional relationship, and you now know, okay, I can't let my life keep going this way. I feel too stuck. I know that there's more for me out there. I am just lacking the how. Then book a breakthrough call and go to bethanydotson.com/talk. We'll have a very honest conversation with you for about 45 minutes. We're going to get you super clear on what isn't working. You have an idea of what's not working, but usually your idea of what's not working isn't what the real issue is. Secondly, we're going to get you very clear on what you really want, how you want to feel emotionally every day, how that impacts the relationship with your kids if you have them, what a healthy relationship feels like for you, and get you super clear on the outcome that you want in your life. And if we feel confident, we can help you overcome your trauma, your trust issues, your fear, the ways that you were sabotaging yourself and keeping yourself fenced in. We'll talk about the details of working together. And if at the same time, We don't think it's going to be a great fit for whatever reason. We'll give you the next steps for you that so that you can start breaking your cycle in dysfunctional relationships. So if you are a professional, if you're career oriented, if love is the one area that you continue to fail in, if you're single or divorced, you're not hoping to work it out with someone who's dysfunctional that you know in your heart is not right for you. And you've probably already had your very fair share of talk therapy and you know that there's more out there for you, but you just don't know how to get there. Go to bethanydotson.com/talk and we'll see if we can help you change your life, heal your trauma, your codependency, and break your cycle. Take care, everybody, and I will talk to you really soon. Thank you for tuning in to today's show. A brand new episode drops each week. Be sure to click and subscribe. And remember, healing trauma, codependency, and your lifelong pattern in love does not happen by itself. You need expert guidance and evidence-based methods. And I have helped hundreds of incredible women from all over the country heal betrayal trauma and reclaim their confidence while falling wildly in love with their own lives and attracting healthy relationships. If you like what you heard today and you want to see if you're fit to work with us, go to bethanydotson.com/talk. That's bethanydotson.com/talk and book a call to speak with us today. We'll get on the phone for about 45 minutes and get you crystal clear on 3 things. The real reason you keep attracting dysfunctional relationships, even if you know better or even if you've done tons of work on yourself. What you really want in a relationship, how you want to feel emotionally every single day in your life, and what lifestyle changes you want to make. And then number 3, the exact strategy you need to be using to get there. Again, healing trust issues, codependency, and a lifelong pattern does not happen without expert guidance. We've helped hundreds of women across the country heal complex trauma, codependency, and have the healthiest relationships ever, both with themselves and with others. Go to bethanydotson.com/talk to book your call today. I'll see you on the next episode.